Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
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 Om Surabhyaya Namaha
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 Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yat kripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Yat kripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Welcome to our daily reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, and a special welcome to all of our Varnasrama college students coming from quite some distance. Hyderabad, mostly from Telangana, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and then a few, of course, from Pune. Came before, the batch from Telangana. So we are reading from the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 2, which is entitled Divinity and Divine Service. We are soon to begin, actually tomorrow, or even today, a series of very, very important verses, which Srila Prabhupada has quoted very often, and which in many ways summarize within these 5-6 verses the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness. That's why this particular chapter is very important for the devotees. So text 16. Yes. Shushrusho Shraddadhanasya Vasudeva Katha Ruchihi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipraha Punya Tirtha Nishevanat Shushrusho Shraddadhanasya Vasudeva Katha Ruchihi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevanat Shushrusho Shraddadhanasya Vasudeva Katha Ruchihi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevanat Shushrusho Shraddadhanasya Vasudeva Katha Ruchihi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevanat.
शुश्रूषो श्रद्धानस्य
शुश्रूषो श्रद्धानस्य
वासुदेव कथारुचि
वासुदेव कथारुचि
महत्सेवया विप्रः
पुण्यतीर्थनिसेवना
शुश्रूषो श्रद्धानस्य वासुदेवः कथारुचिः स्यान्महत्सेवया विप्राः पुण्यतीर्थनिसेवना शुश्रूषो श्रद्धानस्य
वासुदेव कथारुचि
स्यान्महत्सेवया विप्राः
Shushrushoho, one who is engaged in hearing. Shraddadhanasya, with care and attention. Vasudeva, in respect to Vasudeva. Katha, the message. Ruchihi, affinity. Syat, is made possible. Mahat Sevaya, and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki.
Jai.
O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, a great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Kindly repeat after me. O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Purport. The conditioned life. Purport. Now is hearing. Yeah. The conditioned life of a living being is caused by his revolting against the Lord. There are men called Deva, or godly living beings, and there are men called Asuras, or demons, who are against the authority of the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 16th chapter, a vivid description of the Asuras is given, in which it is said that the Asuras are put into lower and lower states of ignorance, life after life, and so sink to the lower animal forms and have no information of the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. These Asuras are gradually rectified to God consciousness by the mercy of the Lord's liberated servitors in different countries, according to the supreme will. Such devotees of God are very confidential associates of the Lord, and when they come to save human society from the dangers of godlessness, they are known as the powerful incarnations of the Lord, as sons of the Lord, as servants of the Lord, or as associates of the Lord. But none of them falsely claim to be God themselves. This is a blasphemy declared by the asuras, and the demoniac followers of such asuras also accept pretenders as God or his incarnation. In the revealed scriptures, there is definite information of the incarnation of God. No one should be accepted as God or an incarnation of God unless he is confirmed by the revealed scriptures. The servants of God are to be respected as God by the devotees who actually want to go back to Godhead. Such servants of God are called Mahatmas or Tirthas, and they preach according to particular time and place. The servants of God urge people to become devotees of the Lord. They never tolerate being called God. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was God himself according to the indication of the revealed scriptures, but he played the part of a devotee. People who knew him to be God addressed him as God, but he used to block his ears with his hands and chant the name of Lord Vishnu. He strongly protested against being called God, although undoubtedly he was God himself. The Lord behaves so to warn us against unscrupulous men who take pleasure in being addressed as God. In the last paragraph of the purport, the servants of God come to propagate God consciousness, and intelligent people should cooperate with them in every respect. By serving the servant of God, one can please God more than by directly serving the Lord. The Lord is more pleased when he sees that his servants are properly respected, because such servants risk everything for the service of the Lord, and so are very dear to the Lord. The Lord declares in the Bhagavad Gita 18:69 that no one is dearer to him than one who risks everything to preach his glory. By serving the servants of the Lord, one gradually gets the quality of such servants, and thus one becomes qualified to hear the glories of God. The eagerness to hear about God is the first qualification of a devotee eligible for entering the kingdom of God. Translation again. O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. So in the beginning of the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains about basically two categories of people in the material world. They are known as Sura and Asura, or Deva. Deva means Deva means sometimes demigod. Deva means devotee, someone who is conscious of God. And those who are Asura, they don't accept God, and they engage in various activities. Of course, a nice message which is being conveyed here is that in order for us to become or to be within the category of Deva, or Deva means those who are having higher developed consciousness, we must have the good fortune to come in contact with those who are cultivating this higher consciousness. And that is only possible in the human form of life. Just like we see these dogs just walking around, they're not at all interested in hearing what's going on here. They know that at the end of the class there's going to be some prasadam. That's why they're here. But they still get benefit by hearing, because it is when we hear from such literatures as Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, that is transcendental sound vibration. And even we may not understand. One time a devotee was asking Srila Prabhupada, because as we did a little earlier, and as we do whenever we have a class, we recite the Sanskrit. So one devotee was not very much attracted to reciting Sanskrit and was asking Prabhupada, why do we have to recite the Sanskrit? I don't understand anything about Sanskrit. And Prabhupada replied that even if you don't understand, actually the spirit soul within you benefits, because it is transcendental sound vibration. And of course, even in our own language, we may be hearing this subject matter, but unless our consciousness is properly developed or purified, then we will not be able to fully capture what is being conveyed. So beginning from the verse that will be read tomorrow, the explanation is nicely being given, how it is that we come from a lower level, let's say asuric mentality, and how to come to the highest level of those who are in the category of Deva. Of course, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that such persons who come in contact with this knowledge, they are called also Mahatmas, great souls, because they they take shelter of the internal energy, or the divine energy, which is referred to, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita as the Daivi Prakriti. So we were discussing last few days how as long as we remain under the influence of the external energy, we must know. Actually, we can only come to know when we read such literatures as Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam that there are different energies at play. All of which are, of course, created by Krishna. Basically, three energies that we must understand. By understanding these three energies, then we can begin to act in such a way that we will associate with that energy which will be beneficial for us. So we are presently surrounded or living and controlled as well by the external energy called Bahiranga Shakti. Bahiranga Shakti, referred to also as Maya. We are living, our acharyas explain, in the kingdom of Maya. Material world is the kingdom of Maya, so therefore it is understandable that those who are in this material world are heavily influenced by this external energy, isn't it? Also referred to as the stringent laws of the material world, which is, of course, explained in detail in the Bhagavad Gita. The gunas, the three modes of material nature. Krishna explains that actually due to our contact with these modes of material nature, mana shastrani indriyani prakriti stani karshati. Although we are the eternal servants of Krishna, Mama Evangsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. We are the eternal parts and parcel of Krishna. But due to allowing our senses and our mind, our material senses, our material mind, and our material intelligence also, allowing these three levels to be connected with these gunas, then prakriti stani karshati, our hard struggle. All of us are struggling in the material world. No one is freed from that struggle. One can become freed, actually, and that is what is explained in these Vedic literatures. One can become freed, one can learn how to no longer be highly conditioned by this energy, external energy of Maya. And of course, Krishna explains that it is by coming to know that there's another world, another energy, another reality, another dimension, which is the spiritual dimension, where one can actually awaken one's spiritual senses, spiritual mind, spiritual intelligence. Actually, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita how that is the beginning of awakening, when we begin to understand that we are actually transcendental. We are transcendental to our material senses. We are transcendental to our material mind and to our material intelligence. Then, by cultivation of this knowledge, we learn to steady our mind. We were reading that verse, I think, yesterday or the day before. We steady our mind by, Prabhupada uses the word, deliberate
deliberate spiritual intelligence.
By deliberate spiritual intelligence. We need to meditate on what that means actually. Deliberate spiritual intelligence. It's not that we have spiritual intelligence. We are spiritual intelligence. Living entity by nature is Satchitananda, full of intelligence, spiritual intelligence. And because of being, of having these qualities, therefore we are by nature also, when we are freed from these gunas, fully happy and satisfied. So what is the meaning of deliberate spiritual intelligence? It means that once we know, once we come in contact, we only come to know if we're fortunate to receive one of these books or meet a devotee, somebody who is cultivating this knowledge, and then we are invited. We hear from these literatures if we are attentive and if we are serious in wanting to understand. Then we are told that we have to apply ourselves. So deliberate spiritual intelligence means practicing to deal with any and all circumstances that on a daily basis happen, that influence us in so many different ways, learning, being conscious that there is a proper way to deal with it and that there is an improper way. Also, Krishna speaks about these two ways or two paths that he refers as Nivriti Marga and Pravriti Marga. Pravritim cha, Nivritim cha, Jana Navidur Asura. The word Asura comes up actually many places. Na socham, na pichacharo, na satyam teshu vidyate. One who doesn't know that there are these two energies, one who doesn't know between the recommended and proper path or proper way, then he will obviously develop asuric qualities. He will not be clean, he will not be well behaved, and he will also cannot be truthful. He will not be truthful to himself, he will not be truthful to others. So therefore, this is also nicely explained here. Two things are stressed. Hearing, of course, is always the most important activity. In addition to hearing, if we hear properly, as it is explained like in this verse, engaging in service to the devotees of the Lord, or engaging in service to anything that is dear to Krishna. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that actually Krishna becomes even more pleased when we serve his devotees than when we serve him directly, isn't it? That same point also nicely explained by Lord Shiva in that very famous verse. Who knows it, that verse? Okay. Yes?
Aradhananam sarvesham Vishnu.
Yes.
Aradhananam sarvesham Vishnor aradhanam param. Tasmat parataram devi tadiyanam samarcham.
Very good. You can give the translation? I mean, yeah, as close as possible.
Worshipping Lord Vishnu
Is the param highest form of worship. Yes. but even higher.
But even higher is serving his devotees.
Yes. Serving his devotees and serving anything which is in connection, anything and anyone which is dear to Krishna. Just like the cows are very dear to Krishna. When we do Goseva, Krishna becomes very pleased. When we serve his devotees are, of course, very dear. And when we engage in preaching, what happens when we engage in preaching? We are endeavoring to reconnect, because ultimately even those who are not conscious, they are also Krishna's devotees. Everyone is Krishna's devotee because everyone is created by Krishna. So that is, this is the recommendation being given here, that if we want to actually realize higher subject matters, it is not simply by some intellectual gymnastic. To actually come to the level of what is called Vigyan. There is Gyan, Vigyan. Anyone who reads a book can get some Gyan, some knowledge. But the Vigyan comes, that's one of the verses actually coming in a few days. But that Vigyan will only come when one actually practically engages in devotional service, you see. Because it is Krishna who actually awards, who is giving us, who allows us, who facilitates, who actually removes the impediments that are there for regaining our eternal constitutional self as devotees of the Lord, as eternal servants of the Lord. So the process of Krishna consciousness, which is nicely given here in the Bhagavatam, is a very practical and very systematic process. We simply have to hear attentively. We have to be eager to actually hear. We have to be eager to understand. And we have to, the message in today's verse, we have to engage in some practical devotional activities. We have to do something. One devotee was explaining how in the very beginning, although he was able to get the close association of Srila Prabhupada, but he felt that unless I do something special, I won't really get the kind of attention that I want. So he ended up doing something very that very few could do actually. I'm talking about at that time, I think many of you may not know him, but he was one of the earlier sannyasis by the name of Guru Kripa Swami. He wanted to get, even before being initiated, he wanted to get the special mercy of Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada ended up giving him the name Guru Kripa, one who received the mercy of a Guru, yeah. And he is the one actually, along with other devotees, who tirelessly went out preaching in different parts of the world and actually collecting for these big projects in India, Mayapur, Vrindavan, and Mumbai. And they would spend many hours preaching, contacting people, getting donations, etc. And Srila Prabhupada was very pleased with him. So if we want a devotee, someone who understands that, just like Prabhupada also explains, when we chant the holy name is compared to a small child crying. By this crying, he will get the attention of his mother. So in other words, somehow if we just go along our merry way, without actually making a special effort to understand Krishna consciousness, to put into practice Krishna consciousness, and unless we understand what is, who is telling? Yeah, some visitors came this morning mentioning how there are different groups or different sampradayas. The specialty of our sampradaya, of our Gaudiya Vaishnava sampradaya, is our outreach preaching. That Prabhupada had that inherited that mood from his Guru Maharaj, that we should be, he would explain that my Guru Maharaj used to say, if you have life, you will preach. No life, no preaching. Means one who is actually understanding. We must come to understand what is the mission of Guru, what is the mission of our acharyas, what is the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that mission, of course, is to bring fallen souls, beginning with our own self, to Krishna consciousness. So we have to simultaneously work on ourselves, and then also, as much as possible, assist in giving that opportunity to as many people as possible. One time Prabhupada explained how the best way to keep one's mind fixed up, the best way to keep the mind engaged, is by somehow or other meditating on the preaching mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we can see by Srila Prabhupada's own example that he was constantly planning and telling so many, proposing so many projects, to the devotees. So the best way to actually make our mind peaceful, to keep our mind peaceful, is to with our higher intelligence. We have to use our higher intelligence. We have to use our spiritual intelligence. Even we cannot simply rely on our material intelligence. That verse is in the very last verse, actually, of the second chapter, which we were just reciting a few minutes ago. I'll just read it again, because it's very pertinent, and it's right here. This is the last statement of Lord Krishna in the third chapter to Arjuna. I'll just read the translation. That is text 43 of chapter 3. Thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses. See, unless we come in contact with devotees or read one of these books, we won't know this. Majority of people, they're just on the bodily platform. They don't know. Or they may have at best some kind of vague idea. So, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence. Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada puts into bracket. Means spiritual intelligence is Krishna consciousness. And thus, then what will happen? And thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Because that was a question just a few verses before this. Krishna was asking, Arjuna was asking Krishna, what is it that impels us, that practically forces us to engage in sinful activities? And Krishna explains that it is lust, which is all pervading. The sitting place of that lust is the mind, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence as well. We have a few minutes for some possible questions or comments on this.
In the purport, it is mentioned that the Lord will appear, and that is given in the scriptures.
The Lord will appear in person.
Yeah, in the scriptures. In the scriptures, it is mentioned like no.
Okay, yeah, the Lord will appear.
But some says that why we are restricting that Lord is independent and He can appear anyway, so may not be like in the mentioned in the scriptures. And
Well, some people are arguing that because if we go only by what the scriptures say, then we're limiting the Lord. He could appear even if it's not written in the scriptures. Scriptures are there to actually reveal to us, based on what the Lord Himself explains and what the self-realized souls also explain, and they will explain the same that the Lord mentions, that He appears at scheduled times. There's a chapter on that, scheduled incarnations. The Lord appears at scheduled times, for example, every yuga. And there are also defined characteristics that example was given in the purport regarding Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There are specific characteristics that need to be there for us to know or to understand that God does appear or has appeared. So in other words, one of the fundamental principles, we can say, for devotees, which is again repeated and explained by our acharyas, is that we get all of our knowledge from the Shastra. So Shastra is telling us that this is the means or the process by which we can recognize God who appears. He can appear anytime, and He does, but He appears both in scheduled incarnations and whenever there is a need. But there are specific characteristics that are there which will help one understand if that is truly an incarnation of God. So it is not limiting God if God Himself is giving instructions in the Vedic literatures that you will recognize me as an incarnation if such and such and such is in place, you know. Yeah. Yes.
Well, this was in discussion which we had before this class.
Today?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you were mentioning in the discussion that only Paramhamsas are Suras and Asuras. Only Paramhamsas are the real Suras. They have. and all others are having a tinge of some kind of asuric thing.
Yes.
So, like considering that yes, I also have asuric thing and all. So how can we identify it? Because especially when we deal with devotees, because we are having the I am having the asuric tendencies. At the same time, I'm dealing with Vaishnavas, devotees. So once anything happens, then we will come to know after that yes, I am also conditioned. So I have behaved like this with such and such Vaishnava. So how we have to, how we can actually identify it quickly before any kind of action taken on Vaishnava?
How we can identify quickly?
Before implementing or before taking any action on any Vaishnava, either verbally or mentally, because that mentality is always there. How to identify it before any action is taken?
And therefore, our acharyas like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and all other acharyas very strongly warn against judging other Vaishnavas. That quote we read actually because it was the disappearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur maybe last week something, and there was one particular quote that was going around actually touching this point, that he was instructing that it is not at all our business, therefore we should be extremely cautious in judging others, especially Vaishnavas, and that is only the business of Guru and Krishna. Only Guru and Krishna should be judging. Of course, we have situations, let's say in terms of management, so that is something different. In management, if one has a particular position where he has to administer, then he has to take certain decisions, but he should still in that position be always very cautious. Even within our ISKCON society, for example, sometimes we call it discipline. Sometimes we have to discipline very senior people, but that is done generally by a group of Vaishnavas and after a lot of consideration. So sometimes, for example, when we have an organization such as ours, which is a global organization, and there are certain standards that are defined, and if individuals at whatever level, from the lower levels to the topmost level, if they are not in in line with those principles, then there is a built-in system whereby one may be called upon, or maybe some decision may be taken. Means it will be done not whimsically, but very carefully, and and only for those who are in the highest, we could say, position to do that. It is therefore strictly we are warned very clearly that we should be very cautious in in correcting others or criticizing others, etc. like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Guru. As you told about one could, as Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, third verse, last verse of the third chapter you are mentioning, and one can study the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence.
Yes.
So how we can develop that deliberateness or spiritual intelligence?
How to develop that deliberateness? One has to very strongly desire. One has to be very serious and very determined in wanting to become free from the influence of Maya. So, in other words, every individual has to apply oneself. So deliberate generally means it is premeditated, isn't it? Deliberate. He deliberately did this. He thought about it and he did it. So many things we do sometimes, but not thinking about it. So deliberate, just like if somebody commits premeditated murder, that is very serious because you thought about it, you wanted to do it, and then you go through the motions and you kill someone, for example. So premeditated murder is a capital punishment, whereas if it's accidental or whatever. So premeditated means that we need to develop, need to understand how rare it is to get a human form of life, how rare it is to come in contact with this knowledge, how rare it is to live another day. Just like today we got news of a devotee whom some of us know very closely, who just, like it happens all the time, got into an accident, a vehicle accident, and then left his body within a short time. I think many of you probably know him also. Our Gajanan Agarwal, who was very, very much dedicated to promoting cow care, cow protection, cow culture, Varnasrama, so many things. Actually, just a few months ago, some of our devotees, or two devotees who are not here right now, they were in Uttarakhand. He was there. He actually came there because that's what he loves to do. He travels everywhere and makes videos that he puts up on his, he's got thousands of videos. Yeah, he's been doing that for many, many years. Wonderful service, so much of information. So our two devotees who went to take a course, actually 2.5 months back, they met him there because he was doing shooting. It was a course on cob building, which we're doing here right now. And so when I came to know he was there, because I met him before a number of times, and I was asking our Subal and Subal and Vijay to bring back some seeds, from there. Of course, Uttarakhand is probably not the best place to get seeds, but they kind of somehow he came to know, and then shortly after that, he sent me the seeds that you're using, like now that we're using here. He's the one. He sent a whole package by mail, close to 300 packets of seeds, all organic, natural, and each of them labeled very, very nicely, and when to plant it, what it, some were vegetables seeds, some were flower seeds, some were fruit seeds. So it's like, who would think from one moment to another? I mean, Hari Kirtan Prabhu, same thing. Life is very unpredictable. We're here now. Who knows who's going to be sitting here tomorrow morning? I mean, tomorrow for a class. So therefore, one who is hearing properly, he will have heard this many times, that life is short, life is precious, and therefore we should make the maximum use of our life by understanding.
Please charge.
Hare Krishna. She has something to say. So it's a question of individual personal determination, as also nicely explained by Srila Rupa Goswami. I mean, all of these great personalities, they are examples for us. They left everything. They had, Rupa and Sanatan, for example. There's so many such personalities. They took the message very seriously, and it's not that everyone has to leave everything in terms of physically, but we have to leave our cut our attachment. You know, it's a question of develop consciousness, and so all of us are hearing the same message, and we just have to have or develop a quality to our hearing this message of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So before it gets too dark, and looks like it's not going to rain just now, maybe later, we don't know. We'll end class for now. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Sri Prabhupada ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanand. And there's a little bit of prasadam here.
Suriness Bhakti Raghav Maharaj.
Jai.